Hey everyone, and welcome to the tutorial series for the Procedural City Generator. This is the quick start guide to PCG. That means that it's going to be a fairly short video where we go through the entire process from start to finish of creating our city. So you can see here we're going to be enabling our main interface, creating our first city from scratch and naming it, spawning our different city zones, generating our road network, and finally, once we're happy with that, spawning our buildings, our props, and our foliage. Fairly simple. After this video, we're going to be doing deep dives into each individual category here, and that's when you're really going to look into the specific blueprints, the different options, and how to, for example, create your own custom zones, add your own custom buildings, etc. So let's go ahead and jump into Unreal. And we are here at the showcase level. If you haven't done it, feel free to hit play in this level and take the guided tour. All you need to do is follow the arrows here, and you'll get these little pop-up messages that kind of give you an idea of everything that's included. But for today, we want to create a new level and do everything from scratch. So I've already done that before I started the recording. I created a level called Level YouTube. And it's basically the equivalent of clicking on click on file, new, and default. Just didn't want to do the process live on video. All of the different elements I've categorized under a folder called scene. The skylight was made movable, and the light source has been made movable. We will not be baking any lighting here. I have also added a post-process volume to temper the auto exposure, so it's a lot easier for us to navigate the scene and see how things look. Besides that, everything else we're going to be doing from scratch. So the first thing you want to do is go to the top level folder, Procedural City, go into Blueprints, go into Interface, and right here you're going to see PCG underscore main. This is the main UI element. So right click and select Run Editor Utility Widget. And right there you'll see that the unified UI pops up with all of the different tabs here. Notice that this is a dockable element, so you don't necessarily have to have it there. You can dock it anywhere you want. So you can see here, you can even make it a floating window if you really wanted to, if you have that set up. I personally like it docked right here as a separate tab under modes and merge actors. And you can see that I've made the UI with the elements to kind of fit into this area here. All right, so let's go ahead and already save, click save. And the first thing we want to do is we want to spawn our scene blueprints. So go ahead and click on spawn scene blueprints, and you'll see that automatically we have a new folder created called PCG. Everything city related will be inside this folder to keep things organized. And underneath we have the main blueprints, the actual city generator, and the road manager. Then we want to actually create a new city by entering a name. So let's just call this test city. Not very creative. You can add any name you want and click on create city. Notice that now we have the city here and we have a brand new blueprint called test city. This is going to be the container where everything else falls underneath. But we can't really see anything yet, right? And that's because we haven't spawned our city limits or connector. So click on spawn city limits and you'll see that we have some city limits here. I'm going to move the camera above so we can actually see what we're doing. And nice little tip, if you hit control and one of the numbers on your keypad, in my case control 1, you can just press the 1 key or whatever number and the camera position is saved. That's really handy if you want to quickly navigate your scene. So I've already set up my camera here at the top. We want to make sure that we see everything generating. And notice that with the city limits selected, we have a few options here. Mainly these three here. The bound scale for a box, that's the default area shape. But you can also have cylinder and you can also have triangle. So by default, the marker is not visible. But if you wanted to really mess with this, make sure you click on marker visible and you can see the area here. And if you wanted to have the shape not be a rectangle or a box, you can just simply make this smaller, like 200 by 200. And then let's say that you wanted a more circular or cylindrical shape, then you can simply scale this one up. And you can see that now our city would be circular. By the way, you can scale it any way you want, so it can be like an oval. Or if you wanted to have it like a triangle, well, same thing. You can just scale the values here. So that's pretty much it. We are going to go back to the default 2000 by 2000, but you can make any shape you want. I'm going to hide the marker, and that's because when we're spawning elements inside the limits, we want to actually see the elements, but I wanted to show how you guys can do that. Also, you can scale this to any size you want. We're going to keep it at 2000 by 2000, so generation is a little bit quicker. But again, you can play with these values here very easily. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to spawn our road connectors. And here's the idea. When we are generating your road network, which is going to come in a little bit, we're going to be using these quote-unquote road connectors, or these are basically roundabouts, that are going to be the main backbone of our city. And once we generate more than one city in the scene, our highways are going to be connecting from one road connector in one city to another road connector in another city. And that's the way that we can keep a cohesive road network in the entire scene through multiple cities. So you can click on spawn road connector. I'm going to zoom in here, and you can see that this is basically a roundabout. And by default, you can see that we have a little roundabout with a little fountain here. Okay, and we want to go back up, and we're simply going to move this to any location we want. In my case, I want to make a little triangle shape, so I'm going to spawn another road connector here. I'm going to move it down, and another road connector here, and I'm going to move it to the right. My recommendation is not to have too many road connectors. Once we get to the actual road generation, you'll see why. But these road connectors are just to give you control over the general structure of your city, right? So you're going to have right here a triangle generated shape here, and then from there you're going to have the main roads come. So I would recommend between 2 and 5 at most, depending on the size of your city. Play around with those numbers. We're going to keep it at 3 here. All right, and that's pretty much it for the city creation. You can see again that everything's kind of here. Next up is we're going to be spawning our city zones. So click on the zones tab and look at the drop down menu here. Select the zone, and by default you have commercial, industrial, residential, rural, and simple buildings. Let's go ahead and do a commercial zone, and you can click on spawn selected zone. And notice that we now have a new city zones container with an actual commercial zone here. Same thing as before. You can scale the volume, and you have 3 options. You have a box, you have a triangle, and you have a cylinder. So you can play around with the scale and the shape. And we're just going to leave it here for now. Let's go ahead and create an industrial zone and spawn it. Notice that it's going to spawn on top. In this case, we want to actually move it, and we're going to move it to, let's say, here. And we can scale the Y. Let's make this like 2000. Whoops. 2000. The zones don't have to be perfectly aligned. You can have a zone that spills over the city limits in this case, and that's perfectly fine. Or you can have a zone that that is inside the limits with some empty areas. Once the spawner is going, if no zone is found, no buildings will respawn. So you can have areas of your city where nothing is spawned, for example. Let's go ahead and spawn a residential zone. And we're going to do residential. We're going to move it to this side here. And let's scale it. Let's scale it by the X. Let's make it like 1000. And you can see that we're doing this little thing here. And then let's do rural. and we'll do the same thing. Let's make this 1,000. By the way, you can have any setup you want. I'm just literally just doing this on the fly. And let's make this a little bit bigger here. Let's make it like 600 by 600, just so there is a little bit of overlap. And then finally, simple buildings. We're just going to move the simple buildings to the bottom here. Okay. And let's scale this. Let's make it like 600. Okay. Let's go ahead and click save, and let's see exactly what we've done. So basically, if you come to the side of the city, you'll notice that these volumes have different heights. Notice that. The commercial is the one with the biggest height. Then the industrial has the second biggest height. And then eventually you can see the difference. Residential and finally rural. And the reason for that is because the spawner is doing ray tracing every single time and trying to detect the current zone. So if there is an overlap between this zone and this zone, for example, this little area here, well, because this zone is taller, this is going to win out, basically. And you can see the height right here as 150 versus this one has 20. So once you start creating your own custom zones, or you can have more than one of the same zone, by the way, you can have multiple commercial zones everywhere. Make sure that you play around with the heights depending on which zone you want it to win out when it comes to an overlap. So for example, here, this has the same height as this one. Let's go ahead and reduce this to something like, I don't know, 130. And it's slightly smaller, you can see here, but the point is that in this zone, anything that spawns in between this area is still going to be a commercial zone, right? And I press 1 and I can come here all the way, and I'm going to click on save. Now, before I move on to the rows, I just want to show you really quickly what a zone actually is. If you click on any of these, in this case, I have commercial. You can see the settings here. There's the material, there's the bounds, obviously, there's the marker. You can make it visible, invisible. But right here, you can see that we have several settings for our spawning. You can see, I'm actually going to click on edit so it's easier to see on a bigger screen. You can see that we have right here several options for the zone. You can have a zone be active or inactive. You can have the zone have the ability to spawn cul-de-sacs. Then you actually have your actual buildings that will spawn in the zone. And I'm going to expand one. You can see that we have the actor reference. This is the actual blueprint. We have the actual bounds of the building in the X and Y. We have the building buffer range, and this is the space between buildings, and there is a range. Every time you see a range means that there's going to be a random value. So min and max are 100. That means that it's going to be exactly 100, but you can also come here and make this like between 100 and 200, and that will give you a little bit of randomness in the spacing. Then you have a strict buffer, same deal, 500 units outside out of the road. If you wanted some buildings to have a bigger buffer between themselves and the road, you can change these values here. There's a percent chance to spawn between 0 and 1. 1 means 100% chance. You can have a per building setting, whether you want this building to spawn in a cul-de-sac. You can also change the number of or max number of spawns of the building. -1 means unlimited. That's the default. But say that you wanted a building to only spawn once, or maybe just a few times. You'll see that, for example, for the police station, I actually have a limit there, or a percent chance to spawn, and that gives you control over how many times a building appears. You can have a minimum distance between this building and another building of its own type. So say that you wanted to do the subways. You don't want 2 subway stations to be next to each other, because obviously that doesn't make sense. So in that case, you can enable minimum distance, and you can put a radius here. And that basically will do tracing and will make sure that the buildings are spawned far from each other. Then you have the interior class. This is going to be the top level class that defines all of the interior props for the building. and that can include multiple floors. You have an option here to flatten the landscape. Right now, excuse me, right now this is disabled, even though the option is visible here. Landscape support will come in a later update. And then you have allowed road list. In other words, this building specifically is only allowed to spawn on which types of roads. So in this case, again, by default, this building can spawn on any road, but you can very easily come here and say, no, for this specific building, I only want this building to spawn on main roads and minor roads. But side roads, you can simply uncheck this and this building will not spawn on that road. So that's pretty much all of the high level features here for the buildings. And you can see that we have 9 different building types on commercial. For fixed props, we only have 1 fixed prop for commercial. You can add as many as you want. And in this case, we only have the street lights. And you can see that in this case, we have a static mesh as opposed to the buildings that have a blueprint class. That's because the buildings have a lot more settings. But in this case, a prop can be either an actor class or a static mesh. You can have the bounds, same idea, road buffer, and then you can have the scale. You can have a min and max scale, a distance between each of these props. So in this case, every 3,000 Unreal units will spawn a light in this zone. You can have rotation. You can have things like random yaw, align to surface, do a building trace. That means that you do not want this spawning in front of a building. And that's an option if you wanted to. And you have the option of spawning this either on the right hand side of the road or on the left hand side of the road. So a lot of options here. And random props, we're going to have the same idea for options. In this case, we have the sedan, but because it is random, we have a couple of additional settings. We have a % chance to spawn, and 0.4 means 40%, obviously. So every single time that we come here, there's a 40% chance that we're going to be spawning a sedan. And in this case, I wanted to spawn on a random side of the road. So we don't want it to spawn on the right and the left. We want it to be a random size. And you got, again, the same idea for allowed road list. So that's kind of a high level overview of what the zones are. Each individual zone has different buildings, different props, and different foliage. And you can create custom zones, as many as you want, and you can mix and match all of the different elements for your city. Before I move on to the roads, I'm going to select all of these right here. And I'm going to come all the way here and I'm going to make the markers invisible. So tick here and they basically go away. And again, that is because we want to make sure that we can see how the roads are being generated. Okay. Now click on roads. And this is one of the more involved panels here. You see a lot of options. We're going to stick to the very basic ones. We have generate highways. We're not going to do this now. Highways are only generated if we are connecting more than one city in our scene. So these are not going to be used at this time. We're going to start with connecting roads. And connecting roads are going to be roads that are going to connect the roundabouts that you see here. So if we click on generate connecting roads, you can see immediately that we have some roads connecting our roundabouts. And they're going to have different colors to denotate the type of road. Blue means a main road. And you can see that if we leave it at that, we can click on generate main roads. And immediately you see that there are other roads of the same color that are generated not only from the roundabout, but from these other roads as well. And if I go up, you can see that they are respecting the bounds. You can click on generate main roads again if you wanted to, and then more roads will appear. Because of randomness, every single time you click on generate, you're going to get different results. So if you're not happy with this, click on remove main roads, and you can click on generate again, and you'll get completely different patterns. Feel free to change the roads here. Notice that they are splined, so you can quickly come here and say, hey, I actually don't like this road. It's way too close. So you can click and delete it. You can also come here and say, I want this road to curve a little bit more to the side, and you can do that as well. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to keep things as splines, is because it gives you guys a lot more flexibility. Then you can click on generate minor roads, and minor and side roads are batched. That means that they're going to be generating, I'm going to remove this here, they're going to be generating on a batch basis. They're not going to be generating all at the same time, and that is to save on performance. So if you click on minor roads, notice that we've generated some minor roads here, and it says batch 0 of 9 out of 15. That means that we have more roads to generate. So go ahead and click on the button one more time, and when you see done, that's when the minor roads have completed their generation. Notice that some of these are not yellow, they are kind of this purple color, and that's because these ones that are purple are marked to spawn cul-de-sacs. And you can see that we have a separate button for cul-de-sacs here. We're gonna look at the settings in just a minute, but let's go ahead and generate our side roads the same way. So click on side roads and see that we are still need to click it twice. And now we have our actual road network, our basic road network. Notice that the main roads are obviously a lot bigger, and then the minor roads are slightly smaller, and then eventually the side roads are the green ones, are the very, very small ones. So very simple. Main roads are 4-lane roads, minor are 2-lane roads, and side roads are 1-lane roads. You can also spawn cul-de-sacs here and crossroads here, or you can go ahead and remove all of the roads and start over. So let's quickly go to advanced settings. We're not going to click on everything here, but one of the main things is the generation preset. And I have some presets here like mild curves, default, grid-like, etc. Grid-like basically means that they're going to be straight. Either they're going to be at 90-degree angles. Default is basically slight curves, mild curves, heavy curves, and organic. These options give the rows more and more curvature. We're going to go ahead and click on grid. And the reason for that is because right now the crossroads are only compatible with grid-like roads. I will be looking at ways of making them better suited for curved roads later on. Here you have density, spawn density, meaning how many roads are going to be spawned. And you can see that the density here by default is medium, high, high. We can leave that there. You also have a chance to spawn for the minor and side roads. By default, they have a 75% chance to spawn. But if you wanted less density, for example, you can either change the spawn density here, or you can simply change the number here. So say that you don't want as many minor roads or as many side roads, we can make this say 50% chance to spawn, and that way we control that. And finally, CDS stands for cul-de-sacs, and there is a chance for cul-de-sacs for minor and side roads. By default, they have a 20% chance to spawn for minor roads and 20% chance to spawn for side roads. We can say, let's just go ahead and make this 50% chance for side roads. That way, we'll keep this a little bit more frequent. Click on Save Settings. That's very important. And when we go back here and we go ahead and regenerate our roads, notice that now our connecting roads are straight, and that's because the connecting roads are themselves main roads. We click on Generate Main Roads, and notice now that everything's perfectly straight. Again, you can change those settings. We're going to generate our minor roads. Finish the batch. There we go. And one more. We're going to generate our side roads. And we are done. And finally, let's go ahead and spawn our cul-de-sacs. And if we scroll down here, you'll see that some of the cul-de-sacs have spawned. You can see here. You may wonder how come this road, even though it's marked for a cul-de-sac, did not spawn a cul-de-sac. And that has to do with the zone. If I click on the zone here, let's go back to our zones. It's very important because this is going to come up. Whoops. And we enable the marker. Notice that this cul-de-sac was in this zone here. And if we click on the options for the zone, notice that the option to spawn cul-de-sacs is off. And the reason for that is because usually you don't see cul-de-sacs in commercial zones, for example, or industrial zones. Or in this case, the simple buildings are supposed to be commercial. So you have a lot of control. So if you see that something's not spawning, most likely it is because the option on the actual zone is disabled. That's why this is not spawning. All right. Otherwise, that may trip you up a little bit, and you may think that this is a it's broken or there's a bug. Notice here that we do have some bugs with the roads here. This is one of the reasons why I have marked this asset as early access. You may need to do some manual adjustments here. You can see that I can just kind of move them here, kind of here, and the same idea here. And you can right click and delete a specific spline point, and you can go ahead and delete a specific spline point and just kind of move it here. So you are going to have certain situations where the roads are not perfect, and they may need some adjustment. However, if you really look at it really quickly, you can see that most of them are fine. They try to unite or join in a perpendicular way. So by and large, I think that the rows are fairly good, but you may need to come and do some adjustments. All right. Okay, so once we're happy here, let's say that this is the road network that you wanted. I'm gonna hit this one here. We can go ahead and actually go to our buildings. I do have a tab for parts. We're not gonna do this right now. This is intended for you to have your procedural park if you own that asset. I intend to do a future update where I have a editor widget panel that you can quickly add here, and you can just spawn your park and place it in your city. This would be the step where you would do that. We're not there yet, so we're going to skip it and go straight to buildings. And right here we have some settings: spawn check, complex, total spawn price, and everything. I'm not going to go over this. These are some more advanced settings, so for now just leave that there. We are going to be focusing on these two buttons here. We want to first spawn the cul-de-sac buildings, and we just click here. And notice that if we zoom down to some of the cul-de-sacs, we have some buildings that have spawned in the cul-de-sac. We don't have too many cul-de-sacs in this city. I think that's only those two. But based on the zone, the buildings will spawn. So this is a residential, and that was a rural. If you don't like these buildings, you can click on remove buildings and click on spawn again. And you can see that the buildings are going to be different. So in this case, you see that the buildings were different. They're all randomly generated. And then we want to click on spawn road buildings. And these are going to be the buildings that spawn all across the road. So spawn road buildings. And this is going to be batched. So be patient. As you click, you can see that we have 0 of 19 out of 76. So we're going to keep clicking on spawn road buildings. And remember, based on the zone, you're going to have the different buildings appear. Okay. If you have a really good computer, this should be pretty much instant. In my case, I have a pretty modest computer, so we have this building series. You can see that we have different buildings spawned here. All right. And you can see the zones here, and actually you can see, let me go back up here, that we can see the different buildings here spawned. You can obviously come here and then customize your buildings. You can click and move the buildings to anywhere you want, for example. That is not a problem. For now, we're going to stick to this design because we don't want to spend too much time here. Let's go ahead and click on props. And we're going to start by spawning the fixed props. And these are usually pretty quick. You can see that they're done. And if I come down here, you can see, oops, that we have the lights here as the props. And we're going to do the same thing for the random props. So click on spawn random props. And they're spawned. And if you wanted to, you could redo the random props. Click on them again. That way you kind of double the density of those props. All right. And finally, let's go ahead and do the foliage. So we're going to go back here to foliage and we're going to spawn our city foliage. So click on the button. And based on the zone, like in this case, the rural and the residential zones, they have foliage that spawns around across the roads. And if we go all the way up here, you can see that now we have a basic city. We have other options for foliage. We can spawn an area foliage and a spline foliage. Those are specific spawners. So say that you're in this area here, there's a really blank area, you wanted to make a little park. So let's go ahead and spawn an area foliage. And automatically you see that the element is spawned there and it's automatically selected. So we can just drag it to this area here. And we can just rotate it. And we can scale it by using the bound scale here. And we leave it there. And let's just do a spline spawner as well to show you guys how to do that. And we're going to do it here to create a custom shape. And the spline spawner is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a spline that you can control. And you can click on Alt, drag to create different spline points here. So we're going to create a custom shape. It can be anything you want. And then after that, what we can do is we can come here and say spawn area foliage. And when you do that, notice that we have now trees in this area. And then we can come here and say spawn spline foliage. And you have foliage that is following the spline, as you can see. And obviously, once you select the spawner, you can see that there's a lot of options here, like the call distance, the foliage to spawn, how many, in this case is 100, the distance, the min and max width. So for example, if you wanted to remove spline foliage and you wanted to come here and say, actually the min width is 500 and the max is 1000, and I want something like 500 foliage or trees to spawn, then you can go back and click on spawn foliage. Notice that we have kind of a path forming around, and you can click on spawn foliage again to make it really, really dense. And you're basically creating a little pathway. And you can combine these spawners, by the way. You can grab one of these spawners and put it on top and do anything you want for your city. All right. Last thing I want to show you guys, and I know this video is going long, is go back to your roads. And we want to go right here to this part where it says select. We want to click on main roads, click on the button select, and notice all of the main roads are now selected. Then we can go here and under construction mode, we can uncheck construction mode. And you'll see that the roads are going to be now using their final mode and texture, which is obviously much nicer with the lines and everything. The reason for that is because roads that are using the not in construction mode are a lot heavier for performance. So if you want to modify a road, you want to make sure that you do it in construction mode. So really quickly, select your minor roads, deselect construction mode. You can see the yellow ones here. And then go to side roads, select them, and deselect construction mode. And now you see that the city is looking a lot more like what you would expect. All right. And last but not least, let's do the crossroads. Actually, that was a small mistake. You should have done the crossroads before you did the props, because you don't want the props interfering with the trace. So we won't do that in this video, but basically you can click on spawn crossroads, and you'll see the crossroads spawn here and create their. You know what? Let's just go ahead and do it. Sorry guys. Let's remove spline foliage and remove fixed and random props, and go back here, and we're just gonna go ahead and spawn crossroads. Oops. One thing here is you want to make sure that you select the roads for the crossroads. So we are going to start with the main roads. Go ahead and select all of the main roads. And then you want to click on spawn crossroads when all of the main roads are selected. And you can see now that the crossroads have spawned. Then we go to minor roads. We select the minor roads and we spawn the crossroads. Make sure you wait until the batching is done. You can see how the crossroads are being generated here. See that? Go to the side roads, select all the side roads, and spawn crossroads. And you can see the crossroads here. Notice that the method is a lot more accurate when the roads are grid-like. If the roads are curved, the crossroads will spawn, but you will have to do some manual modification there. So reset batch. Let's quickly spawn everything else. This video is going a little bit longer than I expected, guys. Sorry about that. But I wanted to show you guys the crossroads, and then spawn foliage and spawn area foliage and spawn spline foliage. And now we have the foliage here. All right. Very cool. Okay. And now all we need to do is hit play. So let's go ahead and select our current camera location. I'm going to go ahead and save everything before I hit play. And we're going to walk around the city so you guys can see what we've created. All right. Click play here. I'll make this full screen. And why not show the FPS here? You can see that we have our houses. When you go into a house, press E. That's the default key to interact. You can go into a house and you can see that the interiors are spawning only on proximity. Go outside. You can go to this house here, for example. And again, go into the front entrance, press E for opening and interacting. And you can see that now we can go anywhere in the house. And we have all of our stuff here. We can go to a gas station here. And you can see in this case, this gas station by default has some interior props here. There is a % chance for cars to spawn here. And so not every gas station will have cars. And that's again by design. And if you jump and press the jump button when you are in the air, I've included this very simple blueprint that allows you to kind of fly around. And if you press left shift, it'll kind of push you forward. And that again is to give you a chance to kind of fly around the city. And you can see that we have the full city here. And you can go to any building you want, and you'll see that everything is spawning as intended. And that is pretty much it, guys. This was a little longer than I expected, but I wanted to make sure that we got everything covered. If you have any questions at all about the quick start guide, make sure that you leave your comments below. Join our Discord for questions. Again, if you find anything that doesn't seem correct, please feel free to come to the Discord and let me know. I consider some of these assets to be still early access, meaning that I still need to polish them up a little bit more. But by and large, everything that you see in the video should be working. You should be able to create your city like we went through from start to finish. Yeah, that is pretty much it for the video, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you in the next video.